Yo, 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 this is John Hope Bryant. This is the Black Effect Network podcast series on iHeartRadio. And this is John Bryant. And again, Money and Wealth is the series. And the topic today is something I've never really talked about. It's something I've never unpacked, but I'm going to unpack it with you today. It's how I created a $75 million a year national nonprofit organization that in many people's minds is a bit of a powerhouse for financial inclusion and financial literacy and economic empowerment. You may hear the announcements and press releases and things like that, but I'm going to unpack, and as I've said, I'm going to do with the entire series in this podcast, these podcast episodes, is to unpack and demystify the how, the what, the who, to a lesser degree, the why. We sort of know the why, though I'll get into a bit of that. But I'm going to get you into the wheelhouse of what I did 32 years ago in founding Operation Hope. I've created 60 different entities, and I'm happy to unpack the other entities. If any of those are of interest to you, just send me a note on social media to me and my team and let me know the ideas you have of what you'd like me to talk about. I've talked about the Promise Homes Company before, which I substantially sold a few years ago. I still own an interest in that. That's the company that owns 700 homes and from Atlanta through North Florida. I walked through that, but I'm happy to go into detail there. There's my other ventures. I won't go through them, but today uh, I want to unpack the nonprofit, which most people know me through, which is really my passion. I believe financial literacy is a civil rights issue of this generation. I believe, and I say this respectfully and humbly, I believe this is what Dr. King would be doing if he was still alive today. I believe this is a game changer for this generation, is as important as the right to vote. But none of that is the reason that Operation Hope has become this behemoth. Let me take you back to its founding, but let me start by making something clear. I say it several times in different interviews, but I'm going to make this clear with regard to my own enterprises. Business is not personal. Whenever you make an emotional decision, it's going to be a bad one. So please know that with a nonprofit corporation, it is a corporation. It's not a plaything. It's not a toy, and you don't own it. Here's a wake-up call. I founded Operation Hope. I gave it its original money. I birthed it. I created its incorporation documents. I'm the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer. I took my money from my for-profit and lent it to my nonprofit, gave some of it to my nonprofit, and lent some of it to the nonprofit, which I expected that money to come back to me. Most of it was a gift, an unintended gift, but a gift. But I don't own this nonprofit. It's actually, Operation Hope is owned by the American public because it's a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Now, it is a corporation just like Netflix is a corporation. It's a corporation just like Tyler Perry Studios is a corporation. It is a corporation just like any other for-profit entity. The difference is that when you apply for a tax-exempt status for that corporation, in order to not pay taxes on revenue and income and all that stuff, transactions, to be tax exempt, you have to have a purpose that is for the public purpose. And the shareholder stops being you, the individual. Please pay attention to this. This is very important. I don't want you to end up in prison. I don't want anybody here listening to this to end up in bad stead with the federal government, particularly the IRS. This is so important to get this right. when you have a for-profit corporation and you're the shareholder and you take the risk and you get, and it does well and it's profitable, depending on the shareholder agreements and the kind of shares that you have and whether you're the sole shareholder and so on and so forth, theoretically, that money is yours. You take it out as you see fit. You take it out in the form of salary, take it out in the form of a loan. You can invest it. You can sell the company. You can sell your shares. You can dilute the shares. You can do whatever you want. You are a shareholder in a for-profit enterprise. But when you run a 501c3, in my case, 501c3 nonprofit, it starts out as a normal corporation. You then apply to the Internal Revenue Service for tax exempt status. And if they grant that status, you become a different entity. No different than I said that the institution of marriage existed 3,000 years before Christ our Lord endowed it with spiritual dimensions. It existed as an agreement to protect wealth. And then it became spiritually endowed. Of course, we know the life of Jesus and so on and so forth. And now it is a different thing, rightly so. But it started out as a contract. So, similarly, by the way, what I just told you is literally true. I've talked about that several times. How marriage it started out as a business agreement. If you think about the royal houses in Europe, and you had two family members effectively marrying each other, sort of disgusting, but anyway, two family members marrying each other. They didn't even live in the same castles or the same rooms sometimes, but they were protecting the assets of the family. That's why one royal house would marry another royal house. It wasn't back then for love. So in this case, you start out as a for-profit corporation, a regular generic corporate entity, a C corp or S corp, whatever, and you request tax exempt status from the federal government. Now, when you do that, and it gives you this tax exemption, and there are different types of tax exemption. So you research that yourself. By the way, a church is another form of a tax exempt organization. But let's stay focused. Mine is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The minute, and by the way, if it's pending, if your tax exempt status is pending, you can take that corporation and go to somebody else who has an existing nonprofit, and they can host your nonprofit. I've done this for several entities, people I trust. You got to be able to trust the people who bring you this. But I have hosted other nonprofits who are trying to get their tax exempt status. So folks who want to donate to them can send the money to Joe's feeding pantry through Operation Hope, and we're a bit of the caretaker. We're carrying the money in trust, and the folks making the contribution still get their tax exempt status, even though they get they get the benefit of their tax contribution, the charitable contribution, of which they then write off their taxes, because they're sending the money to Operation Hope, which is tax exempt, even though the entity that they are trying to donate to is still pending with the IRS. Now, back to the story. Once you make something tax exempt like that, you no longer own it. You have traded a benefit. You've traded your interest, your ownership of that entity for the public good. And now you're talking on the public good versus your own good. And as a result of that, because the money is not flowing to you, the interest is not flowing to you, you don't want the taxes to be owed by you either. And the government says, well, you're doing good work. We're going to give you a break, a pass on any earnings you make. We're not going to charge you for that. And then on top of that, we're going to give those who donate you money a benefit, a tax exempt status for their donation, their contribution. Why am I telling you this? I have some rules at Operation Hope. One of the rules, and I've had these rules for 32 years, I can benefit my nonprofit, but my nonprofit cannot be seen as benefiting me. Now, I didn't say my nonprofit couldn't benefit me. I went further and said my nonprofit cannot be seen, perceived as benefiting me. All right. I've also said don't do anything you don't want to see on the front page of the New York Times in 5 years. Don't put me in a limousine by accident in charge of the Operation Hope. don't don't put me in some luxury hotel suite and charge it to Operation Hope. Don't buy me a first class plane ticket with rack rate and charge it to Operation Hope. So we have policies for travel. Right, I used to travel for years and years and years. I traveled cheap coach, right? um, I remember one trip I took early in the foundation of Operation Hope. Rachel, my chief of staff now for 30 plus years, she's an amazing human being. She was trying to save some money, so she put me. This is when we lived in LA. I lived in LA. She put me on this plane that was going someplace in the U.S., but for some reason it detoured to South America, went through Mexico on his way. It was very cheap ticket, and there was a chicken underneath my seat. In my coach seat. My knees were already at my chest, but there was a chicken buck, 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 underneath the seat. And boy, I let Rachel have it. But she's like, "Hey, you told me to find the cheapest ticket, and I did. Don't be mad at me because I did my job." We've had so much fun and so many fabulous memories over these 32 years, and we don't have time. As I'm now recounting this, we won't have time to get through all this on this one podcast. But I hope you like this. I hope this is enjoyable. I'll try to get through these key lessons for you of do's and don'ts. And then maybe I have to come back and do part two. You'll tell me whether you're too bored with part one for me to do part two, but I'm happy to go deeper into this. So never do anything you don't want to see on the front page of the New York Times in 5 years. As Rod McGrew, my dear friend, would say, think 3 times and act once. If you think about something and it doesn't sound right to you, and you got to think about it again, think about it a third time, you probably shouldn't do it. It's probably going to end up badly. If something is to your benefit, so I have an expense account, I have an expense report, not an expense account. There's a difference. I don't carry the corporation's credit card. I use my credit card and I'm reimbursed by the company for the company's expenses. This is my nonprofit. I don't have an expense account. An expense account means that you have an account with the corporation. It allocates certain monies to you for whatever, and you just have to account for the monies that are being allocated to you. But when it's a 501c3 charitable nonprofit, you're using the public's money, and you cannot use that money like it's your own because, well, it's not your own, right? And you can go to jail. Do I have your attention now? You can go to the popo. You can go to prison, and you can go to jail. Which one's worse now? Go to jail. Yeah, jail. Then you can go to prison. If you are seen, it's a felony to defraud the public funds through a charitable 501c3 nonprofit. There have been many nonprofit founders who have gone to jail because they thought that the money they were using, they treated it as if it's their own. So I'm paranoid about certain things. These are some frameworks that you have. I know I'm a black man in America, so I've got to be twice as intelligent, twice as honest, twice as smart, get up twice as early, stay up twice as late, work twice as hard, have twice as much integrity, and that's fine. Haters make me better, but no one's harder on me than I am. So I just make sure I take care of the business. So I run this nonprofit like a for-profit. Did you hear me? Even though it's not my for-profit. We have a ratio at Operation Hope it's the expense ratio is what I'm getting to. But on Wall Street, a for-profit company is judged through bond ratings. So you have a AAA bond ratings or AA bond rating. But there are companies that rate the quality of your debt, the quality of your company, and it's a public-facing rating. In the nonprofit world, you have a couple entities that do a similar thing. This one that we use is called Charity Navigator. and their top rating is a 4-star. And we've had a 4-star Charity Navigator rating for over a dozen years now. Sorry, over 10 years now. I think it's 11. And that means, in short, that in order to hit that rating, there's several benchmarks, but one of them is that basically about 88 cents of every dollar that comes into Operation Hope. So a dollar comes in for Operation Hope, and the 88 cents goes to the mission. Do you hear me? So it's not shopping, it's not partying, it's not lunching, restauranting. It's not. No, it is the 88 cents of every dollar goes to, in our case, coaching, counseling, supporting the mission, and 12 cents of that dollar goes for useless things like me and, to a lesser degree, my senior management team. So that's called a very efficient nonprofit. You don't want to have a nonprofit that has a bad efficiency rating. You don't want to have a nonprofit where 60 or 80 cents of every dollar is being used for administration, for salaries, for fluff, and 20-25% is actually going to the mission. It should sound sort of obvious, but people don't think about that for some reason. Even a nonprofit where 50 cents on the dollar is going to the mission and 50 cents on the dollar is going to somebody's pocket or to administrative expenses is actually not a good thing. So you should want to aim for, somewhere above 70 cents of every dollar. I believe should be more like 85 cents plus of every dollar that goes to the mission. As a result of us having 87, 88 cents of every dollar coming in, going to the mission consistently, and we have audited financials and transparent books and records, like, you can go to the internet and find out what my senior team and, I guess, me is compensated for at the nonprofit. We're a public entity. You can pull our tax documents and go through it, and people have, right? I've had people, um, uh, uh, you know, uh, call the organization Operation Hope and write us letters and all this kind of stuff years and years ago, when people didn't like me talking about check cashers or payday loan lenders or rent to own stores. I would have people trying to shut me up, and so they would send letters. They'd go through our financials and send letters. I mean, luckily it was just, I'm paranoid about things like books and records. That's how people get you. So you're not gonna catch me slipping. They thought they did, and they were wrong. And our books were just tight. They made certain assertions which I knew weren't right. So we have audited financials. You can have, by the way, a bookkeeper do your financials. You can have a tax pro do your financials. Those are not bulletproof. That's just somebody doing your books and records. Somebody has to certify that these books and records are actually accurate. And we use an audit firm in addition to our accounting firm to certify that our company is doing what we're saying it is that we are doing, and that we're running it in the proper way. And so I have a chief financial officer, I have a chief accountant, I have an accounting team, I've got audit firm, I've got bookkeepers, I've got project managers. We are paranoid about managing the money correctly. Um, let's go back now to, so Operation Hope today is 75 million dollars. It fluctuates, 65 million, 75 million, but it's a lot of money. And that's every year. And the budget I think actually it around 2000, when the pandemic hit, we were about 20-25 million. So you can see the budget has doubled, tripled since then. We have invested through Operation Hope $4.5 billion into underserved neighborhoods for homeowners, small business owners, entrepreneurs, those trying to, lift their lives up. And that $75 million budget facilitates us doing coaching and counseling in bank branches. We're the only nonprofit allowed to operate inside of a bank branch in U.S. history. How did we do that? It wasn't a wish, hope, and a prayer. It wasn't a good feeling. It was me going to the federal banking regulators and writing a letter to all the federal banking regulators. It's called the FFIEC. It's not important for you to know what that means, but it's basically all the regulatory agencies into one group: FDIC, Federal Reserve, Comptroller of the Currency, CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And writing them a letter made a case for why Operation Hope, as a 501c3 nonprofit, should be allowed to operate inside of a bank branch, so that I can get the bank branch to do for a bank what it couldn't do for itself, which is the coaching council. It's customers or prospective customers. The bank can't do that because they're afraid to be sued. They might run into a law or something that they are running afoul of by trying to counsel somebody. So we are in the bank, but we're not employed by the bank. They're employed by me. That gives me an advantage over a bank employee. And so we can work with that client to get their credit score up 54 points in 6 months, 36 to 40, 54 points, their debt down as much as $3,800, their savings up about $1,200, so that the bank, for somebody making $48,000, $50,000 a year, the bank can then say yes. So we're getting the bank out of the no business and into the yes business, so the bank can say yes and give you prime credit. Why is that important? That's why we have 300 physical locations for Operation Hope and 1,200 satellite locations for a total of 1,500 Operation Hope locations in 50 in 42 states. Sorry, and that's why we're a sustainable business model and continuing to grow, because we have a product that solves a problem. Okay, what capitalism is problem solving. Entrepreneurship is, well, capitalism is not necessarily problem solving. Capitalism is making a profit, putting it in your pocket. It's more complicated than that, but I simplified it. But entrepreneurship is problem solving. A business model is problem solving for a profit, for a return on that investment. So I found a problem in banking, and this is one example that I wanted to solve, and that's turned into a sustainable business model. I had a problem um, with youth financial literacy I wanted to solve. I'm still solving that from a business model of, even though we've taught millions of kids financial literacy, that is not that model is not as refined. That's called Hope Inside for Kids, as my Hope Inside for Adults model is. So there's a Hope Inside disaster model that's slightly refined. We are the only organization that is approved by the federal government to do it. Well, we pioneered actually emergency financial disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Sorry for the long explanation, but we're basically the economic Red Cross for the country. And we did that I created that after 9/11, because I had employees in Bankers Trust building across from, well, I think it was called Bankers Trust. It was across from the towers at 9/11. When the towers came down, they fell into the building where my employees were at. My employees were running out the building. And it dawned on me, it wasn't just rich people in these buildings who were, lives were impacted and some people lost their lives. It was the janitors, the office workers, um, the parking valets. And when they lost their life, and the wife is grieving, um, she's also having to pay rent or mortgage that same week or that same month, and now she doesn't know where the bank account is because they didn't talk about that. He didn't have any reserves, so we had to work with FEMA on their behalf and American Red Cross. And so after the cameras leave the disaster for after a few days, the real disaster, the secondary disaster, begins after the loss of life, which is I have a car loan and no car anymore. I have a home loan, no home anymore. I have a small business loan, no small business anymore. I've got bills and no jobs. So we created a program, Rainbows After Storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. We created a program, got it blessed by the federal government. It's actually a funny story around this, and became the nation's partner for FEMA and Homeland Security and the American Red Cross for emergency disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And we're actually responding now to the Los Angeles fires. God bless those who are affected by that. So here's the funny story. Um, this was the George Bush administration, President Bush, after 9/11. So I came up with this idea, and I went to go see the president's team, and they liked my idea. And before they could let me uh, proceed with it, I had to go talk to I think it was the general counsel, but it was basically the president's lawyer in the White House. And he was like, well, this sounds like a great idea, but we can't have any liability here. You need to go back and come back, and, go work out the liability. I know you're working with the insurance companies. I had some loan executives from insurance companies back there. I believe it was State Farm. I don't remember. And go work it out with them and come back and prove that this is not a risk. I didn't know what the guy was talking about really, but I faked it well. So I went back to, I mean, how do you create a business plan for something that's never happened, never existed before? I created this out of whole cloth. It was an idea. So I go back, I flew back to LA, And I sat down with my team and I said to Rachel, my chief of staff, when this, I don't know what I'm asking for, but I'm telling you, when I go back to Washington next week, I need a thump. Well, what does that mean? That means that when somebody looks through this risk management binder, that we're going to prove that we're safe and trustworthy to do this emergency disaster work, coaching work. That when the lawyer, the White House, and his team flips through, or this binder, it thumps on their desk, and they right, it overwhelms them. So anyway, I get this binder. I fly back to DC. I go to the to the attorney's office, the White House, and I drop it out on his desk. He looks up at me, looks down at that, looks up at me, grabs it with one hand, right? looks looks at a couple pages, says, "Yeah, this looks about right." He asked me a couple questions. He signed off on it, and that was it. And I signed an agreement with Tom Ridge, who was the first secretary in history of Homeland Security. That was George Bush administration. And this little black boy from Compton had created the nation's first emergency financial disaster preparedness response and recovery agency. Let's back up now. I've really taken you from Operation Hope backwards. I'm going backwards now. I want to start at the beginning, but this works too. I'm going to tell you another story. This was now President Bush. Is Bush the father? So that was Bush the son. I believe this was not Reagan. I believe this was George Bush the father. He was president. And Secretary of HUD was Jack Kemp, football star and a friend. So I had somehow maneuvered myself through a small business association to sit in the front row of this is actually not an Operation Hope story per se, but I'm still going to tell you because it's instructive. And I'm sitting in the front row for the National Federation of NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business, and I'm sitting in the front row. And how do I get there? I'm the only black guy who's a member of NFIB. I always keep showing up where nobody's at. So I would go to the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, I think that's what it's called. And I was the only chocolate drop in the room trying to do business, trying to build a business. Anyway, so the President Bush is doing this thing, and he's speaking, and they're inviting some folks to come there, and they're just completely all white. They're like, "Well, can you come, John?" Sure. So they sit me in the front row, and the president notices me, and let me get this right. No, I went to it was a reception, and now they want it back. They were invited to the White House now. The president's going to speak again, and they wanted some background information on me. So I get to the White House, and they were, I guess, impressed with the work I was doing in community, which included Operation Hope. I just started Operation Hope, I believe. I'm trying to think of the years. If this might have slightly predated Operation Hope, because I think Operation Hope started when I started in earnest when Clinton had come in office. So anyway, he calls my name. He says, "I commend John Bryant for his work in community," and so on and so forth. And so I was so excited to get up. The president walks by me, and I shake his hand, and I said, "Can I have your business card?" to the president of the United States. And he just points up. I live right there. Well, Jack Kemp and other cabinet members saw me talking to the president. And so I went to say hello to Secretary Jack Kemp, who saw me talking to the president. And I said, "Can I come see you?" He's the Secretary of HUD. He said, "Sure." I fly back to LA. We call Jack Kemp's office to confirm the appointment. We only asked for 15 minutes. Who's going to ever turn you down for 15 minutes? I fly back from LA to DC for my 15-minute meeting. I'm in Jack Kemp's office, and he says, "What are you doing in Washington, D.C.?" "See you, Mr. Secretary." "Oh, that's really great." He's putting his football, throwing his football, in the air. He's got a chief of staff there with him. "Oh, that's really great. What else are you doing here in D.C.?" I'm here to see you, Mr. Secretary." "Oh, that's really great. No, what other meetings do you have in D.C.?" "No, I just came all this way to see you, Mr. Secretary. I came to see the president. He said nice things about my work and community, which I appreciated. And I really wanted to meet you because I want to do some business with HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department." So now he feels guilty because he's only given me 15 minutes. So what did he do? Extended the meeting to an hour. Then he said, "Look, follow me." So he goes down because he's going to swear in Raul Carroll, God rest his soul, as the FHA commissioner, Federal Housing Authority. first black man, I believe, to be sworn in as no, that was another guy who was FHA commissioner. Raul was the president of Ginnie Mae. There's Fannie Mae and there's Ginnie Mae. Uh, Never mind all the details here. Just he was a bad brother, right? And Raul Carroll's his name. And Raul had his family there. And so Jack Kemp says, in the middle of the swearing-in ceremony for Raul Carroll, because I was tagging along with him, he says, "Oh, and by the way, my friend is here from LA. Meet John Bryant." Well, I just met the dude, right? But he called me his friend. Raul Carroll didn't know anything different, any better. So then I said to Raul Carroll, "Congratulations. Can I come see you when you get settled?" Sure. So I fly back to LA. I get another plane ticket. I fly back to Washington, D.C. I go sit down with Raul Carroll. Now, Raul Carroll doesn't know me from a hill of beans, but he knows I was introduced by the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, which is his boss, as his buddy. And Washington's about proximity to power. So and I'm the only brother around. So he knows to be nice to me. So I asked for a business deal. And again, it's not important. I'm gonna get back to Operation Hope. The long and short of it is I got the business deal. I even got the then GE Capital, GE servicing the finance and service the business deal that I got from Raul Carroll and Ginnie Mae just on the power. Luckily, that deal did not go through. I would have lost a lot of money. Right at the end of that deal going through, the president lost his presidency. Bush lost re-election, I believe it was. I'm pretty sure to Bill Clinton. So the deal just unraveled at the last minute. Thank God. But I had made it all that way with my mouth and integrity. I didn't lie. Everybody else was fudging the truth, not me. I just followed the money and you know and didn't give up. That's Operation Hope story. I followed the money. I made it about the green, not black or white or red or blue. We were founded in a bipartisan way, by the way. George, so I went. Tom Bradley was mayor of Atlanta. He was the Democratic mayor of Atlanta. The first black man to run a city like the city of LA. Well, I said the mayor of Atlanta. My bad. Tom Bradley was the mayor of Los Angeles for 20 years. And had no black man had ever run a city like that, a major economy before. And I became a bit of a mentee to Tom Bradley through friends like Will Marshall and Bill Raphael, others who were supportive of me as a young man trying to make it. I used to carry a little computer. I still to this day, it's called an iPad. But back then, I had a big compact computer and I had a Radio Shack computer. These things would, that plus the brick that I had on my shoulder called a mobile phone back then would break somebody's back. It's how am I in good shape today? I used to carry all that stuff all the time to every business meeting. And it's so many stories. I can't tell you all these stories. There's no time. But anyway, Tom Bradley took to me. And when the riots happened, he created Rebuild LA. I became the youngest board member of Rebuild Los Angeles for Peter Uberoff. And I asked Tom Bradley for some startup money for Operation Hope. Tom Bradley, this is why I want you to be bipartisan. Follow the money, right? Tom Bradley, a Democratic mayor, reached out to outgoing President George W. Bush. I'm not sure if it was obvious at that point he wasn't going to be reelected, but he reached out, I think it was, to George W. Bush, the President of the United States, a Republican, and asked him for some money for this young man that he was impressed by after the Rodney King riots and was going to do some stuff to help economically. Tom Bradley's administration said, "We don't have any money. We're on our way out the door." But there's this little grant, the 7J grant, there's $61,000 available. I think I had a budget of $600,000 or something. We have $61,000 available at the Small Business Administration, U.S. Small Business Administration. Do you want that? I just said yes. Always say yes. It always stuns me when somebody has a business or something and they don't want to take like the American Express card because the fees are too high. Wait a minute. Are you arguing with me about what percentage of the profit you're going to get from what my purchase I'm going to make you? Or are you going to let the thing sit on the shelf and not sell it to anybody? So versus if you're selling it for $10 and and you're I'm making this up, you want to make $1 profit off of $10 or $2 profit off of $10. No, you're going to make $1.25 profit or $1.75 profit because the fee is increased because it's Amex. Look, just sell the thing, get it off your shelf and buy something else. So when somebody, don't let the perfect become the death of the good. When somebody would say something to me, as an entrepreneur, the answer was always yes, and I work out the details later. Never let the perfect become the death of the good. So when they offered me $61,000, it was 10% what I was looking for, but I said yes. And I took that $61,000 budget and money and put it to work and sent out a press release, everybody know that we got this grant. We were legitimate from the federal government. And then I used that money to get private banks and corporations in South Central LA or in LA who wanted to help, who were not giving money to rebuild LA, which was the big baller in town, to match me some money for me. And I remember there was this company called Bankers Trust, I'd asked for $600,000 from Bankers Trust, still trying to meet my budget, and they had approved it. And I had a city councilman on my board. I won't name his name because he's still in the mix right there. I don't want to embarrass him, but you would know who he was. He was on my board of directors, and when I said I'm going to rebuild that, something eradicating poverty in the world or something like that, eradicating poverty in my lifetime, he wrote eradicating poverty in the X district. I'm not going to tell you which district. No, I'll tell you, it was the eighth district. Now, some of you historians can figure this out. Eradicating poverty in the eighth district is what he wrote. He crossed my letterhead out. I crossed that out and said eradicating poverty in the world. I was mission authentic. And he resigned from my board. Now, mind you, this is South Central LA. The riots happened in South Central. I needed credibility. When he resigned from the board, that resignation letter somehow made it into the offices of Bankers Trust that had my grant application. Do you know they put that into committee, which means you'll never see it again? I mean, you'll never get that money. That councilman or his staff sent that letter because he was upset with me that I wouldn't just kowtow to him and do what he said. And he sent that letter to the board. They're making the committee the decision about this money with Bankers Trust, and Bankers Trust just said I met with them, and they were like, "Well, we're going to consider this. We're going to put it in the committee and evaluate it." Committee is a nice way of saying you're not getting this money until like the end of the world, and I never got that money. And they thought I was going to fold up and go away, and I just doubled down. Again, an entrepreneur works 18 hours a day to keep from getting a job. And just because you're an entrepreneur of a nonprofit organization, it doesn't matter. I take no for vitamins, right? First, they will ignore you, then they criticize you, then they try to copy you, and then in time, if you keep going, then you win. I had a vision, I had a mission. I was not going to be controlled by anybody. Now, this is really important because if I had allowed that city council person to control my agenda so that I could get some city funds and whatever, I would still be the South Central LA only nonprofit, wrapped up in local stuff, and which is all good. It's important. We need organizations that are just focused on local. We do. That just wasn't my mission. I already had a global vision. I was just starting out, inspired by the potential I saw in my community after the Rodney King riots. He didn't like that. He didn't like that he couldn't control me. That happened several times with other elected officials. And to this day, Operation Hope only has about 15% of federal or public funds in our budget. Most of our money is private. And that has really allowed me maximum flexibility. It's much harder to raise private money. But once I got a business plan down and a reputation for raising private money and looking after it well, people send me millions of dollars today. And they know I'm not going to abuse it. We have audit financials also, of course, every year, but they know I'm not going to abuse it. So they wire money to wherever we tell them and know that we're going to treat it right. And it's done informally. People wire me millions of dollars to Operation Hope, and it's never a big deal because they just know that we're going to treat it right. And today, when a lot of nonprofits are having problems because maybe they can't get money out of the federal government or whatever, I don't have that problem because I don't have a lot of money locked up in the federal government. But it's just harder to get my kind of money because, well, you got to create a legitimate business plan. So again, there's so many stories, and I'm just jumping around. I apologize, but it was really important for me to give you some lessons about how to run a proper corporation. And there's so many examples of what happens when you don't do that right. You go to jail, or you go out of business. So we started out in South Central LA. Initially, it was about financial literacy for children in public schools. I was doing that essentially for free with volunteers. At a big bank, I won't name the bank, you would know who it is, who I designed their financial literacy program. They then decided I was going to become their captured financial literacy organization. I'd run their program with mine. And they thought that because they were the big bad whatever bank that I would just say yes. And I said, no, we're not doing that. We're honored to create a program for you. I hope it helps you. I'm off and running. And they said, well, we're not going to give you any money. I said, fine, I'll go get some money from somebody else. There are 8 billion people in the world. You don't like somebody saying to you, just go talk to somebody else. Again, this bank tried to do the same thing that this elected official did. And to be real clear, the bank, if you want to call the bank the white bank, okay, you can do that for this conversation. That makes you feel better. But the elected official who tried to jam me up twice, 2 different elected officials, 3 actually, were black, right? So pimping is everywhere, right? And people try to take advantage of you or of every stripe. So you really, I call it the bum factor. 20% of people in your family are bums. 20% of people who are Republicans are bums. 20% of people who are Democrats are bums. 20% of Latinos, whites, blacks are bums. 20% of, I mean, it's just the bum factor. It's everywhere. So you should not generalize anybody. Take people as they come and give them the benefit of the doubt. But when they try to trip you up and sell you some wolf tickets, just say no, because you're going to be the one caught with your hand in the cookie jar later, and you're going to be the one that's going to be in trouble. So I always think long term. I step over mess and not in it. I'm never thinking about the transaction. Always thinking about how is this going to look, again, 5 years out, looking backwards. So we started Operation Hope, again, locally, talking about financial literacy. I didn't have a business plan for that. We did small business stuff. I had a small business plan from the SBA. Just told you about that money. I had a line of credit from Cedars Bank, which changed his name 28 times. William Hanna was my banker. I remember we got a line of credit. I had a SBA. It was a MAP program, Mobile Assistance Program. I created this van that we'd go around doing mobile technical assistance for small business in Los Angeles, and I got the SBA to fund that. That was another grant, got them to fund that, and we'd go around and do mobile technical assistance for small businesses. And that program was going pretty well until it wasn't. But that lasted for 2 or 3 years, and I got a bank to give me a line of credit. I think it was $25,000. In fact, that's exactly what it was, to finance it. Because what happened is you put a grant, you get a grant from the federal government. They don't just give you money. You got to do a request for a draw against the grant. First of all, you got to match the grant with private money. It's a whole nother story. And then you got to submit to the federal government to be reimbursed for the cost of what you're spending on this program. Now, in accordance with the budget that you gave them. I didn't have the money to advance and float while the federal government took its time to pay me back. So I went to Cedars Bank, and they asked him for a line of credit. William Hanna, the CEO, went right to the top. It was a community bank. Told him my vision. He believed in me, gave me $25,000 line of credit on my word, secured by this SBA grant. Now, the federal government shuts down. And they weren't writing checks to anybody. They had shut down for months. And I went to William Hanna and said, look, I need $100,000. I think it was $100,000. I need $100,000 line of credit. I don't have any collateral. I can't give you anything else but my word, right? I'll pay you back. But if I don't get this, I'm out of business. And William Hanna told me later, he went to his chief financial officer. I can remember the lady's name, but I won't say it. She's still in banking, I think. And I just want to embarrass her. But she told William Hanna, don't make this loan to John. You'll never get your money back. I know because he told me. And he overruled her. And he gave me this loan for $100,000. And when I found out that the chief financial officer, chief credit officer makes credit decisions in the bank, recommended that I should not get that loan. It wasn't directly racism. She was a minority herself, frankly. She just didn't believe in me. I was a young kid, and everything she thought she knew about a young black kid looked like it had credit risk all over it. She's just loaning money to rich people. I don't blame her, and I don't judge her, but I was going to pay that money back and prove her wrong. So I hustled, and we paid that money back, every dollar, every dime. And I made sure I walked past her office when I had the payoff slip and put it in, and make sure she saw it, as I put it on her desk and put it on William Hanna's desk ultimately, and took his hand and said, thank you. And we're friends to this day. William Hanna changed my life. And when I started out with $25,000 lines of credit, and now I have lines of credit in the millions, unsecured, on my name. Okay, now there's all these little tests that you've got to go through. I remember Mary Airsom, who still works for me to this day. She always gets mad at me because I don't know the exact year that how many years she's been with me, 28 years, whatever. Lance Trigger's been with me for about 30 years. Rachel's been with me for 31, 32 years. Janae Roscoe's been with me for 20 years, and all these people, these legacy leaders who've been with me. So Mary comes in, and she's been, she little white girl from, she won't mind me saying that because we actually call her white chocolate because she's been to South Africa to everybody, more times than everybody at Opera Show other than me, because we opened the offices in South Africa. She ran them all. Uh, but anyway, Mary, a lot of great stories of Mary. First one, when she came in, she was from New York City, and she wanted to work for me. And I said, I don't have any money. What are you going to do in South Central LA? I mean, are you okay? Like, are you safe? She's like, what are you talking about? I just built 38 homes in Watts with Habitat for Humanity. I'm like, are you smoking something? You can't even walk through Watts. Well, she was right. She did go to Watts and built 38 homes through Habitat for Humanity. Once I realized that she had done that, I hired her immediately. And I gave Mary every job title I had because if you could walk and shoe comes at Operation, if you walk past my desk, I'd hand you a task, right? Competency was not important. So Mary had a chief financial officer job. She had every title. So this was a development officer, and this is how bad we were back in the day. Mary, we had this grant. I think it was $90,000 or something from the city of Los Angeles, and uh, the deal was you took draws against the grant, and let's say the work costs $60,000, and you had a $90,000 grant, so you actually had a $30,000 profit that you could pay your staff and your bills with. Well, Mary, being so altruistic, I said, "Well, Mary, payrolls due. Like, where's the money? Like, we did the work." She says, "Oh no, John, we were so efficient. I just gave the rest of the money back to the federal government. I mean, to the city of Los Angeles. What, are you out of your dang on mind? Right? We need that money for payroll." Took Mary out of that job immediately, right? Let me tell you this other Mary story, but hold on. I used to have to write checks out of my checkbook. First of all, I used crack certificates of deposit, CDs. You don't even know what those are, but certificates of deposits, basically a fancy name for a savings account. For my own business, I would break these $25,000, $50,000 CDs to pay Operation Hope's bills because Operation Hope was broke. And and I would write a check on a Friday for payroll and give the check to Rachel. And I said, look, if the donations don't come in by Monday, payroll was Friday night. The checks, need to clear. I said, if you need to deposit my check, here it is. And I'd go off about my business for my weekend. I had complete faith in Operation Hope. I probably wrote 10 checks over time to Rachel for a payroll. She never had to cash one of them, but she always knew I was there if she needed it. And the staff knowing that I would do that meant the staff would stay up late, come in early, stay up late, work weekends, and would never complain. Okay, here's another Mary Airsom story. Okay, I'm not. Am I telling you? Am I? This is entertaining, but am I helping you? Right? to run a nonprofit, to build it. I mean, we were doing so much with so little for so long. We could almost do anything with nothing. I want to break this up into chapters and stories. I've covered the last few years and the first couple of years. So you just have to have chutzpah and courage. We were building a Hope Inside location. Back then, it's called a Hope Banking Center in South Central LA. Oh, so many stories. Um, I need to stop. Uh, we were building this Hope Center, and uh, I wanted to put a digital cyber cafe in. This is about fundraising now. And of course, I didn't have any money as usual. And I thought Vice President Al Gore, then the vice president, he loves technology. I just need to get his attention about this. He'll fund it. So I'd run around the country, find wherever the vice president was, and try to get his attention. Unsuccessful. And you can't just run up on the vice president. Secret Service will shoot you. But I, get close to him, shake his hand, but I couldn't have a conversation. Finally, I was able to go to a Christmas party at the vice president's residence. I finagled an invitation, and I gave him my best 90-second spiel. Don't waste somebody's time talking to them for 5 or 10 and 20 minutes. If you can't, as my friend Hugh Price has said, he's former president of the National Urban League, if you can't say something simply and quickly and crisply, as if your old, slightly senile auntie can understand it, it's not clear in your own head. I remember that quote precisely. So I had my elevator pitch down, and I told the vice president of the United States about my vision of having an inner city cyber cafe because people in the inner city did not have access to the internet. We had a banking center set up, which is a whole nother story because this racist banker who used to be CEO of Hawthorne Savings had to give me money because he was not compliant with the Community Reinvestment Act. He had to give money to somebody. And my friend Tim Chrisman, who was chairman of that bank, who was not racist, was a good guy. He knew the CEO was racist, but we were just trying to get money out of him. He told me what to say and how to say it. I went in, gave this guy my spiel. He said everything he could say to offend me. That didn't work. I didn't respond to it. At the end of the meeting, I said, this guy's not giving me anything. And then he said, I'm going to give you $1 million to build this banking center. So that built the banking center, even though the guy was racist. Yes, that story is completely true. Hawthorne Savings, thank God, was acquired by somebody else. So I don't have to worry about them being upset with this. They're gone away. But thank you, Tim Chrisman, for giving me the support I needed. He also became chairman of Operation Hope. So now I've got this banking center, but I want to build a cyber cafe near it, next to it. So I go and sell this idea to the vice president. I pitch him. He says, yes, this is a great idea. So I then leave the vice president and go back to LA and say, we're going to, did I do this? No, I went to Washington, D.C. I was in Washington. I went to Washington, D.C. for the vice president's residence. The next day, met with the U.S. Economic Development Administration and say, your vice president of the United States wants to support, he's going to cut the ribbon for the Inner City Cyber Cafe on this date. It was like 6 weeks, 8 weeks later. But the problem is I need to build it. It's going to cost me $600,000. I don't have the money. Will you give me the money for your vice president? So they said, we can't give you the whole amount, but we'll give you $300,000 grant. You got to raise the rest. The matching grant, no problem. I then took that $300,000 commitment. I went and they said, well, look, I said, do you guys know anybody who funds technology? I need computers and all this kind of stuff. They said, well, this is a guy named Steve Ryan. He's got a lot of clients that are in technology. So I called this guy, Steve Ryan, and told him my spiel. He says, where are you? I said, I'm in DC. I think he said he was in New York. And he was there with his wife. I said, hold on, I'll be right there. So I flew to New York, met with him at a bar. His wife was checking me out to make sure that, I guess she was the one to make sure that I was not a charlatan. And he called me and says, yeah, my wife checked you out. She likes you. We'll help you. I'm going to set up a conference call with you, these tech companies. So this is the next few days, tech companies get on the phone. One of the people on the phone was all saying this is a horrible idea. And I said, look, you need to get off the phone. You're negative energy. I told the other people on them, I don't need your money. I know I can't get a grant from you this short a period of time, but there's two ways to make money. You make more, you spend less. So I don't need your cash. I need your computers. I need your computers. I need your software. By the way, this is how I ended up with a partner named Intuit, who 30 years later, the former chairman of Intuit is now a very wealthy man, Brad Smith, who runs Marshall University in West Virginia. He's still on my board to this day, and he gave me $1 million just recently. But back then, way back when I didn't know him, I knew the vice president for corporate giving back then at Intuit, which makes Quicken software. And they weren't going to give me a dime. They didn't know who I was. But all I wanted was, I said, look, can you give me the software? Because if you give me the software, I can grant it to small business owners in South Central LA. It was called an in-kind grant. Anyway, I got $300,000 of in-kind computers and software and whatever from these tech companies that didn't hang up the phone on me. That matched the $300,000 grant from the private sector that matched the federal grant for $300,000, made me compliant with that federal grant. And then the money could flow. I then went to Turner Construction Company and said, I need you to start work at cost because this is doing good work through my 501c3 tax exempt nonprofit organization. I'm going to give you a nonprofit in-kind grant, in-kind receipt for a charitable contribution for all the money you didn't make building this inner city cyber cafe, but you're going to get a lot of goodwill from building this. I want you to do that. And they're like, well, how much, when do you need this done? And at this point, I need it done in 3 or 4 weeks. That's impossible. No, look, nothing's impossible. Just say yes. I'm gonna make you look great. We're gonna do a parade for you, whatever. Right? So they're like, sure. They put this African dude. I always get assigned the black person. The whole white company get assigned. It doesn't happen anymore, but it used to. And this black guy did not want to be there. Did not want to be. I got one more story for you. Did not want to be in South Central LA at all. Nice guy. but didn't want to be there. Well, he was always there late. And so if he's late, the workers are late. And I needed this work done on time. Now, ladies, you're going to hate me for this next story. I apologize, but I had to do what I had to do. I said, I know how to get these guys to work. Mary Airsom, please show up to the work site with your best smile and just stay there all day. And she'd get there early, bring coffee and donuts. And somehow these guys all showed up one time now for work, sometimes early, and they stayed late and they built this dang on cyber cafe. Now, the vice president's team shows up, the security team, the Secret Service team, to do a security check, and it's a construction site. And they show up and they're looking around, what the heck's going on here? And I showed up when they were there because I knew there'd be drama. I said, look, there's no problem. I'm doing your job for you. You can look right through the walls and see there's no bombs, there's no security threat. So they signed off on the what's called an advance team, did an advance visit for security. They signed off on it. The Vice President of the United States came, cut the ribbon. We have photos of it. You can look them up online. It was a classic experience. And yeah, that's how I met Michael Milken. That's a whole nother story I don't have time to tell you. But there was one story that I did want to leave you with, and it left me just that fast. I've gotten so excited now. I've gotten into this, all these battle wounds from Operation Hope and what we did and how we did it and what we ducked and what we, the many times we could have got plastered. I'll tell you, I had this grant that went sideways. Well, it was a series of grants that we had, and we got the allocations wrong, and we had multiple years of just bad books. One day we found out that our bookkeeper, it was a brother, did not have a bank account. This is like, Operation was founded in 92. This was like in 94, 95. I think our whole budget was like $300,000 or something. Budget is now, of course, 75 million, give or take. But the guy, we had so much compassion in our hearts. We hired anybody, and we hired this guy. Rachel, listen to this. She'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Lance might know. And he did not have a bank account. Our bookkeeper did not have a bank account. Yes, we quietly walked him out the door, and we gave him a little gift to go away with. And that was not his fault. It was ours. We shouldn't have hired him in the first place. And we got our books and records straight because again, that's a perfect way to have the government shut your stuff down, or worse, go to prison if you cannot account for public money. So from that time forward, once I got saved by that, I think Fred Smith was our president back then, who was a former assistant deputy treasurer for the state of California. Once I got our books and records straight, I made a vow I would never get into that situation ever again. I'd be paranoid about the money, and I was, and I still am. There's been so many times I've had people steal from me. I had a former president of the organization take money. I've had board members try to oust me because they thought I was getting too big for my britches. I was in LA, and I now want to move from LA to a regional. I was in LA, and I think the first office we opened was New York. That's a whole nother story. But the directors who were in LA, the board members who were in LA, saw me getting on planes going across the country, and they had to fight the freeway going from Southern California to Northern California. And they were a big deal in LA, but no one knew them outside of LA. And here I am, this little black kid from Compton in New York City, and they were not feeling it. And so before I knew it, there was a campaign to unseat me from my own nonprofit. And I had to, once again, you got to learn to step over mess and not in it. And don't be emotional, and don't get mad, get even. Success is the best revenge. And ultimately, they resigned from the board. I didn't. And I'm still here, and they're not. And I know the names, and they were friendly until they weren't. Business, capitalism, or gladiator sports is not personal. Do not take this stuff personal. I've just been amused by all these folks who underestimated me over time, and they got caught slipping. I didn't. And I had this guy who Bob Bishop was his name, but he didn't exist. And meaning that he was a made up person. Somebody had hired somebody and to try to take me out because I was talking all this mess about the check cashing industry or whatever. And this guy, supposedly named Bob Bishop, we investigated. The guy didn't exist. Like, he was there, but it wasn't a real person. But this person with this name was sending letters to my board members. And again, if my records weren't straight, I'd been out of there. But it was a lie, and I was able to prove that I was running Operation Hope properly. He said I had basically had my hand in the cookie jar of Operation Hope, which anybody who knows me knows is just absolutely not true. And and he went away. I didn't. I mean, literally, he just stopped. He just went away and I think the person who was associated with him went away with him. Um, all these experiences made me haters make you greater. Like all these experiences just made me a better leader and a better person, made me more resilient. I don't hate anybody. I don't resent anybody. I'm a happy guy, and I'm still as loving and supportive of even people who player hated me back then. People who, if somebody who player hated me back then called me today, I'd still try to help them. I actually do get these calls all the time. People who want me to hire them, all this stuff. We have 400 employees today. We're in 42 states. We have thousands of volunteers. We have millions of clients. Our partners are the best companies and biggest companies in the country. We have 5,000 community-based nonprofit partners. We have a bunch of initiatives like 1 Million Black Business Initiative with Shopify. We committed $190 million to that initiative. Maybe I'll tell you that story before I wrap up. We're already over an hour. Have you enjoyed this, by the way, or are you just tired of hearing me rambling? We have Financial Literacy for All, which I co-chair with Doug McMillan, the CEO of Walmart, another great leader. And our mission there is to get 80% of the Fortune 500 to make financial literacy part of its core mission. 1MBB works well because it's just really about creating new customers for Shopify. I remember I was on Roland Martin's show and somebody said, "Well, what's the big deal about Shopify? Why are they giving us all this money?" I'm like, they want more customers, right? And it turns out, even though I said that in 2020, after George Floyd's murder, it turns out that was the best strategy for 2024. Like it wasn't DEI, it wasn't some minority program. It's just we just they just, Shopify wanted more customers, and we wanted more Black businesses to be created and grown, and so those two things happen to work together. And there are a lot of other stuff Operation Hope is doing, but let me go back to Shopify for a minute. I had done a town hall meeting, and normally I get paid to speak, but this time, this billionaire who ran Shopify was a friend of mine and asked me to give a speech for his team for free. I said sure, and so I did it, and it was over, and it was virtual, and uh, my payments for speaking were that's not my job at Operation Hope to give my personal time to speak. So if I want to pay to speak, if I'm going to get paid to speak, that's my own business as long as I'm not doing it on Operation Hope's time or in Operation Hope's capacity. So I did this for free. I speak for a fee, so I can afford to speak for free often. And when it was over, he said, "Well, what can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, let's try to make sure that George Floyd situations don't happen again. Help me, I don't know, help me create a million new Black businesses in America." And he said, "That's interesting." Now, I didn't say hook me up or hook my cousin up or hook Pookie up, my friend. I said, "Help me think big about these communities." He said, "Well, that's an interesting idea. Send me a proposal." So I wrote something up very short because you don't want to give somebody 2, 3, 4 weeks to forget about you. Again, don't let the perfect become the death of the good. I sent it in right away. And I waited a few days, crickets, nothing. I waited a week, crickets, nothing. So then I wrote a letter back to Toby. "Hey, Toby, love you, brother. Thank you very much for being considerate and caring and wanting to help the community. I recognize I didn't hear back from you, that you're probably not interested. No big deal. We'll do something else down the road. Wish you well. Thanks for your care. Signed, John Bryant." Send. I get an email back almost instantly. "What are you talking about, John Bryant? We said yes." I go to my spam folder. There's a commitment of $130 million that would end up being he said yes, but it ultimately became, because I worked with, there was Toby I, there was a Toby Y who used to be there. There's now Harley Finkelstein, who's the president, who's my guy, and he supports us. And there's Kaz and all these people there who I've grown all these relationships at Shopify. But that was Toby, the founder. And that ultimately ended up becoming a $130 million commitment that a deal I cut 3 days before my Hope Global Forum. That allows people to start businesses essentially for free on Shopify, which is e-commerce. And just always always check your spam folder, but always be gracious. Here's a rule I use for life and business: talk without being offensive, listen without being defensive, and always leave even your adversary with their dignity. Because if you don't do that, then they will spend the rest of their life trying to make you miserable. It becomes personal. Step over mess and not in it. So Operation Hope today is coaching all dealt. This is Hope Inside the Workplace. Is another business model I created, and we pioneered financial coaching with inside of corporations. So we have we're a financial coach for all 100,000 Delta employees, a financial coach for UPS employees, a financial coach so now for some Walmart employees, for Venetian hotel employees in Las Vegas. So we're paid more than it costs us to do it. That's our sustainability model. So we run a nonprofit like you run a business, even though it's a 501c3 check exempt status, and we check all the boxes, but we run it on a sustainable basis. And uh, that's what I encourage you to do, is to figure out, uh, can you solve a problem? But when you solve that problem, can you run the entity that you're trying to run it to solve the problem with with the highest level of integrity and yes, vision, but business finesse, financial acumen, and return on investment. Whether that's a nonprofit or a for-profit, the rules are all the same. If you want to hear more of these stories, if this is useful for you, let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to. As I'm going through this, there's so much of this background that I had to manage and maneuver my way through without getting triggered or upset or petty. I had to always sort of rise above and keep it going, and never give up and never give in. And oftentimes doing things for free turned into opportunity later on. It was my way of proving that I was there for the right reasons. I wasn't there for a quick buck or a transaction. I was there because I believed 100% in the mission. And ultimately, Operation Hope moved to home ownership, and which became a big thing. We've done well over $1 billion or maybe $2 billion in home ownership, disaster response, mortgage crisis. We did mortgage crisis counseling and coaching. Banks paid us to work out to restructure mortgages for people during the 2008 crisis. So we did about $1 billion of restructuring those mortgages. Yeah, I mean, and on and on and on and on and on. And I've worked with Republican and Democratic administrations. I've served as an advisor for three. We triggered the renaming of the building on the White House campus called the Freedmen's Bank Building. Um, and we're continuing our way, in our small way, the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his Poor People's Campaign, as well as the Freedmen's Bank, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln of 1865 and 1968. This unfinished work, which we call silver rights, from civil rights to silver rights. Tell your friends to follow Money and Wealth. Tell them to buy the book Financial Literacy for All, which is a bestseller a year after its publishing as of April. Tell your friends to follow us on social media at Operation Hope and at John Hope Bryant, and be inspired, be encouraged, and listen to the other episodes I have on the series where we solve other problems for you. I want you to know a whole library of where I unpack and demystify how to live your best life, and how to not just crawl up the ladder, but own that dang ladder at some point. If you want to join the Operation Hope mission, you can do it with a small contribution to become a member, or for free. See, it's not about the money for me. We're teaching money, but I'm actually not obsessed about money. I'm obsessed with helping you to take your life back. John O'Brien, love and light. I'll see you in the next episode.